Fired over a suit. How I made my boss pay. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am. This is the story of how I went from being fired over a dress code violation to watching my ex-boss crash and burn while I rose from the ashes. Grab some popcorn, folks. This is a long one. The setup. For context, I, 34M, had been working at Horizon Analytics for nearly 8 years. We're a mid-sized data consulting firm that helps other businesses make sense of their customer information. When I started, we were a scrappy team of 12 people working out of what was essentially a glorified storage unit. Now we have over 100 employees and fancy downtown offices with those weird egg-shaped meeting pods that are somehow both claustrophobic and overpriced. I was the 4th employee hired and the first developer. Our founder, Dave, was a brilliant guy with a vision but absolutely no tech skills. He'd pitch these amazing ideas to clients, then turn to me with that "make it happen" look in his eyes. And I did. Every single time. Over the years, I built our entire data infrastructure from scratch. The ETL pipelines? Mine. The proprietary algorithms? Also mine. The client dashboard that everyone raves about? You guessed it, all me. I'm not bragging, okay, maybe a little, but Horizon Analytics functionally ran on systems I designed, built, and maintained. Dave always appreciated my work. He was old school in the best way, cared more about results than appearances. I could roll into the office in jeans and a t-shirt, and he'd just chuckle and say, "There's my wizard." I was comfortable, productive, and honestly, I felt valued. My typical day involved coming in around 9:30. I'm not a morning person, grabbing my 5th cup of coffee and diving straight into code. Some days I wouldn't even speak to another human until lunch, when I'd emerge from my coding trance to inhale whatever leftovers I'd brought from home. My colleagues affectionately called my workstation the cave, because I'd customized it with dim lighting and surrounded it with whiteboards covered in flowcharts and algorithms that looked like hieroglyphics to anyone but me. Dave understood my quirks. He knew I did my best thinking in comfortable clothes, with minimal distractions and plenty of caffeine. When clients would visit, he'd introduce me as the company's secret weapon and would proudly explain that my unconventional appearance belied my technical genius. The clients would look skeptical until Dave showed them what our systems could do, at which point they'd be too impressed to care what I was wearing. I had built a reputation not just within our company but in the local tech community. I spoke at conferences in jeans, mentored junior developers while wearing Star Wars t-shirts, and even rejected 3 lucrative offers from competitors, none of which mentioned dress codes. Life was good. I was respected for my work, not my wardrobe. Then everything changed when Dave announced his retirement. Enter the dragon. Her name was Melissa Harrington, MBA from Wharton, previous experience at a Fortune 500 company. Perfectly highlighted hair. Wardrobe that probably cost more than my annual salary. From the moment she walked in for her first day as our new CEO, I had a feeling things were about to change. And boy did they. Within her first week, she sent out a company-wide email about elevating our professional standards. Suddenly, we had a strict dress code. Men were required to wear suits and ties, women business formal attire. For a tech company. In 2024. The email was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. It used phrases like presenting a unified brand image, and embodying excellence through appearance, and leveraging professional attire as a competitive advantage. It might as well have said, "I'm deeply uncomfortable with the tech culture I've just inherited and am determined to remake it in my own image." Most of my colleagues grumbled but complied. I watched as our vibrant, comfortable office transformed. Programmers who used to roll in wearing hoodies now shuffled around uncomfortably in stiff suit. Creative discussions that once happened spontaneously around desks moved to sterile conference rooms that had to be booked in advance. The energy of the place changed, became more formal, less innovative. I, however, didn't own a suit. Had never needed one. So I kept showing up in my usual attire. Clean jeans, button-down shirts, occasionally a blazer if I was feeling fancy. I figured my 8 years of service, and the fact that I was, the backbone of the company's technical operations would count for something. Narrator, it did not. The first hint of trouble came when I noticed Melissa watching me during an all-hands meeting. She was scanning the room, probably doing a mental dress code compliance check, when her gaze landed on me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she made a small note on her iPad. I ignored it. I had more important things to worry about, like the major system upgrade we were planning for the following month. That upgrade was crucial. We were moving from a semi-automated data processing system to a fully automated one that would increase our capacity by about 300%. I'd been working on the architecture for months, fine-tuning algorithms and running simulations during weekends. It was my baby, and it was going to revolutionize how we served our clients. In the weeks following the dress code email, I noticed more and more coincidental run-ins with Melissa. She'd appear by the coffee machine when I was filling my cup, or she'd walk past my desk more frequently than necessary. Each time, her gaze would drop pointedly to my jeans before meeting my eyes with a look of disapproval. I pretended not to notice. My team noticed, though. Ryan, my right-hand developer, pulled me aside after a particularly obvious hallway encounter. "Dude, I think you're on her radar," he warned. "Maybe just wear a suit for a couple days to get her off your back?" I laughed. "For what? So I can be uncomfortable and write worse code? No thanks. If she has a problem with my clothes, she can talk to me directly." Ryan looked nervous. "I don't know, man. She fired 2 people from marketing last week for not aligning with the company vision. Whatever that means." I shrugged it off. "I'm not marketing. I built half the systems this company runs on. She's not going to fire me over jeans." In retrospect, that confidence might have been my downfall, or my salvation, depending on how you look at it. The confrontation. 3 weeks after the email, I was called into Melissa's office. Her assistant, yes, she hired an assistant within her first month, looked at my jeans with visible disdain as she escorted me in. The assistant was dressed in what can only be described as a knockoff of Melissa's style, like she was cosplaying as her boss. It would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. Melissa's office used to be Dave's sanctuary, a cluttered, comfortable space with mismatched furniture, tech magazines stacked in corners, and a worn leather couch where he'd take naps during late-night coding sessions. Now it was unrecognizable. Sterile. White furniture, minimalist decor, one of those silly motivational posters about excellence featuring a soaring eagle. The only personal touch was a framed Harvard Business Review with Melissa's face on the cover for some article about transformational leadership in tech. Melissa was sitting behind Dave's old desk, which she'd replaced with some monstrosity of chrome and glass. Without looking up from her laptop, she said, "Mr. Jensen, are you familiar with our dress code policy?" "I am," I replied, remaining standing since she hadn't offered me a seat. "And yet you continue to violate it. May I ask why?" Her tone wasn't angry or confrontational, it was worse. It was condescending, like she was speaking to a particularly dense child who couldn't grasp a simple concept. I explained that I'd been with the company since nearly the beginning, that my work had always been evaluated on merit rather than appearance, and that, frankly, I did my best problem-solving when I was comfortable. Additionally, I added, I'm currently leading the system upgrade that's going to increase our processing capacity by 300%. I need to be focused on that, not on shopping for clothes I don't need and won't use after this arbitrary policy is inevitably reversed. She finally looked up at me, her expression colder than a server room. Arbitrary? Mr. Jensen, perception is reality in business. When clients see a professionally dressed team, they perceive professionalism. When they see— Her eyes flicked dismissively over my attire. Casual employees, they perceive casualness. Mediocrity, even. Our clients care about results, I countered. They care that our systems are stable, efficient, and give them the insights they need. None of our clients have ever complained about my jeans. That you know of, she replied with a thin smile. Besides, this isn't just about clients. It's about company culture, standards, excellence in all things. I couldn't help myself. With all due respect, Ms. Harrington, I've been contributing to this company's culture and standards for 8 years. The excellence of my work speaks for itself. The systems I've built have grown our client base from a dozen local businesses to over 200 national accounts. She steepled her fingers, her red manicure gleaming under the office lights. I don't care if you built this company with your bare hands, Mr. Jensen. Rules are rules. Either comply with the dress code by tomorrow, or don't bother coming in. I'll admit I was stunned. You're threatening to fire me over clothes? I'm informing you of the consequences of your continued insubordination, she replied, already looking back at her laptop. That will be all. I stood there for a moment, waiting for her to realize the absurdity of what she'd just said. She didn't. After an uncomfortable silence, I turned and walked out, my mind racing. Back at my desk, Ryan could tell something was wrong. Meeting with the dragon didn't go well? She threatened to fire me if I don't wear a suit tomorrow, I said, still processing it myself. Ryan's eyes widened. You're kidding. Wish I was. So, are you going to do it? Wear a suit. I looked at my monitors, at the code I'd been crafting for weeks to make our systems even better. I thought about the late nights, the weekends sacrificed, the vacations cut short to solve critical issues. All that dedication, all that value I'd created, and it came down to fabric covering my legs? No, I said finally. I'm not going to do it. Ryan looked panicked. But your job is writing code and building systems, not playing corporate dress-up, I finished. If she wants to fire me over this, let her. I'll be fine. I wasn't entirely sure of that last part, but I was too angry to care. The firing. Spoiler alert, I didn't buy a suit that night. Instead, I went home and did something I probably should have done years ago. I documented everything. Every system I'd built, every weird workaround I'd implemented, every obscure bug I'd fixed with an even more obscure solution. I stayed up until 3 a.m. writing it all down, not as a formal handover document, but as a personal record of what I'd created. Why? Partly out of pride, I suppose, partly as insurance, and partly because I had a nagging feeling I might need it. I showed up the next day in my usual attire, half expecting Melissa to back down when faced with actually following through on her threat. She didn't. By 9:15 a.m., I was sitting in HR, being handed my separation papers by a very uncomfortable-looking HR director named Patricia. "This is insane," Patricia whispered, glancing nervously at her office door. I tried to talk her out of it. We all did. All? I asked. The entire executive team. We had an emergency meeting last night when she informed us of her decision. Everyone advised against it. She wouldn't budge. That was interesting. So Melissa was already alienating her leadership team. Patricia pushed a severance package across her desk. I got you 3 months' pay instead of the standard 2. It's the best I could do. I nodded appreciatively as I skimmed the document. No non-compete? Patricia gave me a small, conspiratorial smile. I might have forgotten to include that page. Oops. By 9:30, security was escorting me out of the building with my personal items in a cardboard box. Classic. As I was walking to the elevator, I passed Melissa in the hallway. She had the audacity to look surprised, like she hadn't been the one to order my termination 2 hours earlier. "You're really choosing this hill to die on?" she asked, seeming genuinely confused that I hadn't immediately bent to her will. "I guess so," I replied. "Good luck with the Jensen system when it goes down." "The what?" "You'll find out." The Jensen system wasn't an official name. It was what Dave jokingly called the collection of interconnected processes I'd built over the years. But Melissa's blank expression told me everything I needed to know. She had no idea what she was about to lose. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a last glimpse of her face, still confident, still certain she'd made the right call. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The aftermath. I went home, cracked open a beer, at 10 a.m., judge away, and started updating my resume. I was angry, sure, but also strangely calm. I knew something Melissa didn't. I was irreplaceable. Not in the egotistical, everyone is special kind of way, but in the practical, I'm the only person who fully understands these systems, and they will absolutely implode without me kind of way. See, over the years, as I built and expanded our infrastructure, documentation took a backseat to implementation. Why write down how something works when you're the only one using it? Besides, Dave never cared about documentation. He just wanted things to work. And they always did, because I was there. I gave it 3 days before the first crisis. It took 2. But before that crisis hit, I had time to reflect on my situation. 8 years at one company is a long time in tech. Maybe this was the push I needed to explore new opportunities. I decided to take a week off before starting my job search in earnest, a mini vacation I'd been putting off for years. I cleaned my apartment, finally, binged a Netflix series I'd been meaning to watch, and even went to the gym a couple times. It was nice. Weirdly nice. I hadn't realized how much of my identity was wrapped up in Horizon Analytics until I was forced to exist without it. On day 2 of my unexpected sabbatical, my phone started blowing up with texts from former colleague. "Ryan, dude, everyone is freaking out. Melissa announced your departure in an all-hands and tried to spin it as mutual. No one's buying it. Lisa from marketing. The entire dev team is talking about a walkout. Should they? Aaron from sales. Client asking for you specifically for their project. What do I tell them?" I ignored most of these. Not out of spite, but because I genuinely didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to encourage the walkout, but I didn't want my friends to lose their jobs. Another part wanted to help with the client, but that wasn't my problem anymore. Instead, I focused on enjoying my free time and waiting for the inevitable. The first cracks. My phone rang at 7:43 p.m. on Wednesday. It was Ryan from the dev team, sounding panicked. "Dude, everything's falling apart. The nightly aggregation failed and now none of the dashboards are updating. Melissa is freaking out because we have client demos tomorrow. What do we do?" I took a long sip of my whiskey, I'd graduated from beer, and said, "That sounds like a real problem for Melissa. Come on, man. We're dying here. Just tell me how to fix it." I sighed. Despite everything, I liked Ryan. He was a good kid. Check the log for the ETL process. If it's the aggregation module, there's a backup script in /utils/backup that you can run. It's not elegant, but it'll get the dashboards working for the demos. You're a lifesaver. No, I said. I'm unemployed. After hanging up, I felt a twinge of guilt for helping. But hey, I wasn't a monster. Besides, that backup script was a band-aid at best. The real issues would start piling up soon enough. What Ryan didn't know, what no one at Horizon knew, was that our systems required constant fine-tuning. There were quarterly updates that needed specialized attention, weekly maintenance tasks that weren't automated, and daily monitoring that only I knew how to interpret properly. Without those things, the infrastructure would slowly degrade until it became unusable. I hadn't designed it that way on purpose. It had evolved organically, with me as the central gardener tending to its growth. Now the garden was without its caretaker, and the weeds would inevitably take over. That night, I made myself a proper dinner, another novelty of unemployment, poured another whiskey, and started browsing job listings. With my experience and reputation in the local tech community, I wasn't particularly worried about finding a new position. The question was whether I wanted another traditional job or if this was an opportunity for something different. Maybe consulting? I could set my own hours, choose my clients, and, most importantly, wear whatever the hell I wanted. I bookmarked a few promising opportunities and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. The domino effect. The next morning, I woke to 3 voicemails from unknown numbers. All from Horizon Analytics employees I barely knew, all desperately seeking help with systems they couldn't understand. I ignored them. Instead, I spent the morning setting up a proper LinkedIn profile. My previous one had been bare bones. I'd never needed it before. Now I crafted a detailed description of my accomplishments at Horizon, careful to focus on measurable results rather than technical details that might be considered proprietary. By noon, I had 7 connection requests from recruiters. By dinner, I had 3 interview offers. The tech job market was hot, and an experienced data architect with a proven track record was apparently in high demand. One particular message caught my eye, from the CTO of Quantum Data Solutions, one of Horizon's main competitors. It was brief and to the point. Heard what happened? Their loss. Let's talk. Lunch tomorrow. I agreed. What did I have to lose? That evening, Ryan called again. This time, he sounded even more frantic. It's getting worse. The backup script worked for the demos, but now the data ingestion pipeline is throwing errors we've never seen before. Jason tried to restart it and now nothing's working. Jason was a junior developer, barely 6 months out of coding bootcamp. The fact that he was messing with the ingestion pipeline was alarming. Why is Jason anywhere near that system? I asked. Because Melissa formed a technical emergency response team and put her friend from business school in charge, some guy named Chad who knows literally nothing about programming but wears really nice suits. The bitterness in Ryan's voice was palpable. Chad assigned Jason to fix the pipeline. I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose. Tell Jason to stop touching things before he makes it worse. The pipeline needs a specific sequence of commands to restart properly. Can you tell me what they are? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to let the whole thing burn to the ground. But again, these were my friends, my colleagues who were suffering, not just Melissa. Fine. Write this down. I spent the next 20 minutes walking Ryan through the restart procedure. When we finished, he thanked me profusely. You should be getting paid consultant rates for this, he said. A light bulb went off in my head. You're right. I should. The revenge begins. Over the next 2 weeks, I fielded no fewer than 23 panicked calls from my former colleague. Each time, I gave them just enough information to put out whatever fire was currently raging, but never enough to understand the underlying system. Meanwhile, I'd been busy. My LinkedIn profile update, experienced data systems architect seeking new opportunities, had attracted serious attention. I'd already done 5 interviews, with 3 companies practically begging me to join them. But the most interesting development came from my lunch with Quantum's CTO, a brilliant woman named Sanjana who had followed my career from afar. She didn't just offer me a job, she offered me partnership in a new venture they were spinning up, focused on the exact kind of data systems I'd specialized in at Horizon. "We've been trying to replicate what Horizon does for years," she admitted over dessert. "Now we can do one better. We can have the actual brain behind those systems building the next generation for us." The offer was generous. 20% more than my Horizon salary, a significant equity stake, and, this was the kicker, complete freedom to build my team and culture as I saw fit. "So I can hire people based on talent rather than wardrobe?" I asked with a smirk. Sanjana laughed. "I don't care if your entire team works in pajamas as long as you deliver results." I told her I needed a few days to consider all my options, but internally I was already sold. In parallel with my job hunt, I also started a Twitter thread about being fired for not wearing a suit in a tech company. It went mini-viral in our industry circles, with over 15,000 likes and hundreds of comments from other tech workers sharing similar stories of clueless management. I didn't name Horizon Analytics directly, but anyone who knew the local tech scene could figure it out. One particular response came from a prominent tech blogger who wanted to interview me for a piece on toxic corporate culture in tech startups. I agreed, carefully framing my story as a cautionary tale about what happens when non-technical leadership imposes arbitrary rules on technical teams. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning and was shared over 50,000 times by evening. #Suitgate started trending in tech circles. Former colleagues sent me screenshots of Melissa's increasingly panicked emails to the staff about maintaining a positive public image and not engaging with misleading narratives on social media. But the best part? Clients were starting to ask questions. According to Aaron from sales, 3 major accounts had specifically inquired about the staff turnover situation and system stability concerns they'd been hearing about. The house of cards was beginning to wobble. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. The plea. "Mr. Jensen? This is Melissa Harrington. I just returned from a promising final interview with Quantum Data Solutions, where Sanjana had introduced me to the rest of the leadership team. They'd loved my vision for their new data platform, and I was on the verge of accepting their offer. I was in a good mood, which probably explained why I didn't immediately hang up. "Ms. Harrington, what can I do for you?" We. She cleared her throat. "We've been experiencing some issues with our systems." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "Not sorry at all. The team is having difficulty maintaining certain aspects of our infrastructure, and I was wondering if you might be available for some consulting work. At a premium rate, of course." I almost laughed out loud. "Let me get this straight. You fired me for not wearing a suit, and now you want to hire me back as a consultant? Would I need to wear a suit for that too?" Silence on the other end. Then, I may have been hasty in my decision. Hasty. Now I did laugh. "You fired the person who built your entire technical infrastructure over a dress code violation. That's not hasty, Ms. Harrington. That's catastrophically poor judgment." More silence. I could almost hear her calculating the cost of her pride versus the cost of system failure. "What would it take to get your help?" She sounded desperate now. "Good. A public apology. In writing. Sent to the entire company. And a revision of the dress code policy. That's... I can't possibly... Then I can't possibly help you. Best of luck." I hung up. My phone rang again immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. After the fifth call, I turned it off completely and poured myself a celebratory glass of the expensive scotch I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. The escalation. The next day, I received an email from Horizon's board of directors, requesting an urgent meeting. Apparently, several major clients had threatened to pull their contracts following persistent issues with the platform. The board had questions about the systems I'd built and why they were suddenly failing. I agreed to the meeting, showing up in jeans and my favorite NASA t-shirt. The conference room fell silent as I walked in. There were 5 board members present, along with Melissa, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and her designer outfit had a small coffee stain on the sleeve. I tried not to smile too obviously. The board members, most of whom had known me for years, seemed relieved to see me. Melissa looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Janet, the board chair, opened the meeting. "Eric, thank you for coming. We're facing a critical situation with our technical infrastructure, and we understand you might be able to provide some insight." I nodded. "Happy to share what I know. Perhaps you could start by explaining why systems that functioned perfectly for years are suddenly experiencing catastrophic failures?" I explained, as simply as I could, that the systems I'd built over 8 years were complex, constantly evolving, and maintained primarily by me. Without proper knowledge transfer, which hadn't happened because I was abruptly fired, it was inevitable that they would begin to degrade. "Think of it like a garden," I said. "If the gardener leaves suddenly, and no one knows which plants need sun versus shade, which need daily watering versus weekly, everything eventually dies, even if it looked perfectly healthy when the gardener left." One of the board members, a venture capitalist named Mark, frowned. "But shouldn't there have been documentation? Manuals? Training materials?" "There should have been," I agreed. "And if I had been given notice or a transition period, I would have created those materials. Instead, I was escorted out of the building with a cardboard box within hours of being told I was fired." All eyes turned to Melissa, whose complexion had gone from pale to ashen. "And what was the reason for this abrupt termination?" Janet asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Before Melissa could respond, I answered honestly. "I was fired for violating the dress code by wearing jeans instead of a suit." Mark literally face-bombed. Another board member muttered something that sounded suspiciously like, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." Melissa attempted to defend herself. "It was an issue of insubordination and company culture. Mr. Jensen repeatedly designed and maintained the systems that generate 100% of our revenue," Janet interrupted sharply. "I think we're clear on the situation." She turned back to me. "Can these issues be fixed?" "Of course," I replied. "But it would require a significant time investment from someone who understands the entire ecosystem. Currently, that's only me." Everyone looked at Melissa, whose face had transitioned from lemon swallowing to full-on constipation. "And would you be willing to return to Horizon to address these issues?" Janet asked. I smiled. "Under the right conditions." "Name them," Mark said immediately. The negotiation. I'd prepared for this moment. I pulled out a neatly typed document outlining my terms. 1. Return as Chief Technology Officer, a promotion from my previous role. 2. A 50% salary increase. 3. Complete autonomy over the technical team. 4. A relaxed dress code for all technical staff. 5. A written apology from Melissa. 6. A seat on the executive leadership team. 7. Budget approval for 3 additional senior developers. 8. A dedicated documentation team. 9. A guaranteed performance bonus structure. 6 weeks of paid vacation annually. Mark whistled as he read through the list. You don't ask for much, do you? I'm asking for what I'm worth, I replied calmly. And what the company needs if it wants to survive. I've received multiple offers from competitors in the last 2 weeks, including one that would give me equity and a higher base salary than what I'm asking for here. I hadn't intended to mention the competing offers, but it seemed like the right moment. The atmosphere in the room shifted. This wasn't just about getting me back. It was about preventing me from going to a competitor with all my knowledge. Janet glanced at the other board members, who nodded subtly. We'll need to discuss the financial details, but in principle, these terms seem acceptable. Melissa finally found her voice. This is extortion. He's holding the company hostage. The room fell silent again. Janet turned to her with an expression of barely contained fury. No, Melissa. What's happening here is the natural consequence of your catastrophic decision-making. You fired a key employee, arguably the key employee, over a dress code violation with no transition plan, no knowledge transfer, and apparently without even understanding what his role entailed. Now we're attempting to mitigate the damage you've caused. Mark added, the quarterly numbers are already showing the impact. Client satisfaction is down 22%, system uptime has decreased by 17%, and 3 major accounts have given notice. But, Melissa started. But nothing, Janet snapped. We're accepting Eric's terms. She turned to me. Can you start tomorrow? I can, I said, but there's one more condition that's non-negotiable. What's that? The apology has to happen first. Today. Company-wide email. To my surprise, they agreed to everything. Well, Melissa tried to argue against the apology, but Janet shut her down with a curt, "You created this mess, Melissa. Swallow your pride or find a new job." The message was clear. Between me and Melissa, the board had chosen me. As I left the meeting, Ryan was waiting in the hallway, clearly having been eavesdropping. His face broke into a huge grin when he saw my expression. You're coming back? Tomorrow, I confirmed. As CTO. Holy shit. He looked like he might cry from relief. The systems are even worse than when I called you. Nothing's working right. We'll fix it, I assured him. Then, with a smile, and by the way, you can burn that suit you've been wearing. New dress code policy coming soon. The return. Walking back into Horizon Analytics as CTO was one of the sweetest moments of my life. My team greeted me with actual applause. Ryan had tears in his eyes, though he later claimed it was allergies. Several people had already ditched their suits, as if my return had automatically invalidated the dress code. My first act was to call an all-hands meeting. I laid out a clear plan for system stabilization, introduced the concept of proper documentation, to much eye-rolling from the dev team, and announced the immediate formation of a knowledge transfer task force to ensure that critical systems were understood by multiple people. No more single points of failure, I declared. Including me. The mood was electric. People were smiling, joking, collaborating in ways I hadn't seen since before Melissa's arrival. It felt like the company I remembered, the one Dave had built, the one I had helped grow. Speaking of Melissa, she was conspicuously absent from the meeting. According to office gossip, Lisa from marketing was an excellent source. She'd locked herself in her office after sending out her apology email. That email had gone out the previous evening, and it was clearly written through gritted teeth, but it was there in black and white. I would like to formally apologize to Eric Jensen for my decision to terminate his employment over dress code violations. This decision was made without full understanding of Mr. Jensen's critical role in our organization and the specialized knowledge he possesses. Moving forward, I am committed to making more informed management decisions that prioritize the company's operational needs over superficial policies. I printed it out and framed it. It now hangs in my office, my new corner office with a view. By lunchtime, I'd already identified the major system issues and dispatched teams to address them. By the end of the day, our critical services were stable again. By the end of the week, we'd returned to normal operations, and I'd begun implementing proper documentation protocols. Clients who had been ready to jump ship were reassured. The Twitter storm began to die down. Things were looking up for everyone except Melissa. The rebuild. Over the next few months, I did what I should have been doing all along, documenting our systems and training others to understand them. I hired 3 new developers and implemented proper knowledge-sharing protocols. I also made some strategic changes to our technical approach. We moved toward a more modular architecture that would be easier to maintain and extend. We introduced automated testing, something I'd always meant to do but never found time for. We even began exploring some cutting-edge AI applications that could give us an edge over competitors. The team was thriving under the new, relaxed culture. People came to work in whatever made them comfortable. Some still wore business attire by choice, others embraced jeans and t-shirts. What mattered was that everyone was more productive, more collaborative, and more innovative than they'd been under Melissa's rigid regime. Speaking of Melissa, her position grew increasingly precarious. The board had lost confidence in her judgment, and clients who had heard about the suit incident, as it became known, were skeptical of her leadership. She tried to reassert her authority in various ways, scheduling unnecessary meetings, criticizing minor details in reports, even attempting to implement a new office organization policy that would have required everyone to keep their desks in a specific, standardized arrangement. Each attempt was met with resistance, not just from me but from the entire leadership team. It was almost sad to watch. She'd come in with such confidence, such certainty that she knew how to run a tech company better than those who'd built it. Now she was flailing, trying to find any way to assert control as it all slipped through her perfectly manicured fingers. The final straw came 3 months after my return. We were pitching to Datacore Industries, potentially our biggest client yet. Their CTO was a notorious tech purist who valued innovation over appearance. He famously conducted board meetings in Hawaiian shirts and flip-flop. During our presentation, Melissa kept trying to steer the conversation toward our professional standards and corporate excellence, while I focused on our technical capabilities and innovative solutions. The disconnect was painful to watch. When the Datacore CTO asked about our developer-friendly culture, I spoke honestly about our journey, how we'd briefly lost our way with rigid policies but had returned to valuing talent over appearance. So that story I heard about someone getting fired over not wearing a suit, that was your company? He asked, eyes wide. Before I could respond diplomatically, Melissa jumped in. That was an unfortunate misunderstanding that has been rectified, she said stiffly. The CTO laughed. Well, I'm glad you came to your senses. I wouldn't trust a data company that values suits over skills. He turned to me. My team would mutiny if I tried to make them wear ties. We landed the contract, the largest in company history. The board was ecstatic. Everyone except Melissa, who sat through the celebration with a fixed smile that never reached her eyes. The next week, Janet called me into her office. Melissa has tendered her resignation, she said without preamble. Effective immediately. I tried to look surprised. Any particular reason? Janet slid a resignation letter across her desk. She cited irreconcilable differences in management philosophy. But between us, the board made it clear she could resign or be fired. I nodded, processing the news. Who's taking over? Janet smiled. We were hoping you might have some thoughts on that. The legacy. It's been a year since Melissa's departure. Horizon Analytics has undergone what tech blogs are calling a renaissance. Our client list has grown by 40%, our systems are more robust than ever, and we've become known as one of the best tech companies to work for in the region. I didn't take the CEO position. I'm a tech guy at heart, not an executive. Instead, we promoted Patricia from HR, whose quiet competence and emotional intelligence have proven to be exactly what the company needed. She consults me on technical decisions. I defer to her on people matters. It works. As for Melissa, I heard she landed at a traditional finance company where suits are the norm and innovation is something you read about in Harvard Business Review. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. Dave, our original founder, stopped by the office last month. He laughed when he saw the framed apology email on my wall, and laughed harder when he saw our new dress code policy, prominently displayed in the lobby. Dress code policy: wear clothes, preferably clean ones. That's it. The company holiday party this year had a theme: suits optional. Nearly everyone showed up in the most ridiculous outfits they could find: Hawaiian shirts, superhero costumes, even pajamas. I wore a three-piece suit just for the irony. As I looked around at my team, brilliant, quirky, comfortable in their own skin, I realized that we'd gained something valuable from the whole ordeal. We'd learned what kind of company we wanted to be, and more importantly, what kind we didn't. Ryan sidled up to me at the bar, wearing a t-shirt that read, "Dress for the job you have, not the one someone thinks you should have." You know what's funny? He said, sipping his beer. If Melissa had just let you wear jeans, none of this would have happened. She'd still be CEO, you'd still be a regular developer, and we wouldn't have landed half the clients we have now. I nodded. Sometimes the smallest hills become the most important ones to die on. Or live on, he corrected with a grin. In your case, definitely live on. I raised my glass. To small hills and big consequences. And to jeans, Ryan added, clinking his glass against mine. Never underestimate the power of comfortable pants. The lesson. So what did I learn from all this? A few things. 1. Your value isn't determined by what you wear, but by what you create. 2. Organizations that prioritize appearance over ability are doomed to mediocrity. 3. Sometimes getting fired is the best thing that can happen to your career. 4. Always document your work. Seriously, I should have done this years ago. 5. The best revenge isn't just success. It's success that forces your enemies to acknowledge they were wrong. And perhaps most importantly, when you build something valuable enough, you get to decide what pants you wear while doing it. As for that job offer from Quantum Data Solutions, I still meet Sanjana for lunch occasionally. She's not bitter that I stayed at Horizon. In fact, we've found ways for our companies to collaborate on certain projects. Turns out there's enough data in the world to keep us all busy. Would I do it all again? Get fired over a suit? Absolutely. Some principles are worth standing up for, even if they seem trivial at first glance. My jeans weren't just about comfort, they were about authenticity, about valuing substance over style, about being judged for my mind rather than my appearance. In the tech world, that's a hill worth dying on. Or in my case, a hill worth climbing to the top of, planting a flag, and building something even better than before. Just make sure you're wearing comfortable pants for the climb. The end.